Trump is unique in many ways because he's the only elected president never to have held public office of any kind. Leaving aside his particular policies or even his political personality, it's this lack of direct experience that has, I think, made a lot of people very nervous.
Why do you think he was elected then?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of commentators have pointed to the fact that we seem to be in a state of political flux globally, that Trump can be seen as part of an international wave of disillusion, really, with established politics. And of course, he was a rank outsider at the beginning of the electoral process, but he tapped into this vein of extreme dissatisfaction. And that is probably the main reason that he's made it as far as the White House.
And what would you say was the role of the media in this election? Because there was a lot of media presence in this election, more so I'd say than perhaps previous elections.
The role of the media in this election, I think, is a very interesting one because Trump had no real media presence in the way that established politicians do, and he didn't use the media in the way that any other presidential candidate has done. Of course, he's largely run against the press. The press almost has the role of being the official opposition in Washington at the moment. He received a lot of coverage from the press and from television. I've heard some people suggest it was about 10 times as much as all the other candidates. So his name was regularly in the news, but he didn't try to reach out to the press in order to campaign. I mean, he campaigned, as it were, directly, largely on Twitter. And the existence of social media has given politicians like Trump a channel of communication directly to the voters that politicians never had before. And he's really capitalised upon that.
But what would you say, in your kind of knowledge, the procedure would be if the Trump-Russia allegations were proved to be true?
If the Russia allegations have any kind of traction, it would be up to the Congress to act upon them. There are a couple of congressional investigations in the works, and the Congress has the power to investigate the executive branch, which is the branch of government headed by the president. I would not suspect that there's likely to be much evidence of a personal involvement by Trump. It's more likely to have been people within his campaign. They might be forced to resign. If any of them were found to have broken any laws, they could be prosecuted. I wouldn't have expected it to have led to the impeachment of the president. But if there is enough evidence for that, then it is entirely possible that the Congress would institute impeachment proceedings against Trump. And then if those were, if the members of Congress felt there was sufficient evidence, he could ultimately be removed from office. But that's never happened before. Two previous presidents have been, two have been tried on charges of impeachment, both acquitted, and President Richard Nixon, of course, famously resigned before the impeachment process got underway. So it's very unlikely that it would result in Trump's removal, but the political damage, of course, could be enormous. Of course, he's not even been in office for 100 days, and very often the first 100 days of a presidency is the period that the media tend to concentrate on to see what he's done. Personally, I would not be surprised if he were to resign before his 4-year term is up. Resign because he is simply so frustrated at not being able to get anything done. He seems to be a very impulsive person. He comes from a business background where he's used to having his orders fulfilled almost immediately. That simply can't happen when you're President of the United States, and I think that might get the better of him.